when we started Masters of the Universe Classics in 2007, 2008, I spent a lot of time working out a release calendar that went all the way to 2018 in order to make sure we didn't burn through characters too quickly. Well, by the time 2016 came around, it looked like that was going to be the last year for Mattel. Maybe part of it was because I had left and they really didn't have a new team to step in, but I like to think that the company just had other priorities. I don't think, I can't think MOTU rested on my shoulders. That can't possibly be, especially because they brought it back. The new team did keep Filmation going, and they, relaunched using Evil Seed here as kind of a bell cow to subscribe to the Eternia line, the Filmation version. If you recall, he looked very different in Filmation versus 2000X, and people definitely wanted both versions. In fact, this was actually our original plan. When we were going to release Evil Seed in the 2000X add-on sub from 2015, we looked at trying to find a way to do both versions. And it just wasn't working. We thought maybe we could do like an overlay with soft goods and a swappable head, but they just have different body frames. This guy's much thinner. And it just wasn't working, especially with all the spikes on this version's arms and legs and yada yada. So I'm glad the new team substituted Cringer for Evil Seed Filmation, especially because we eventually got a Cringer, at least in the Origins line. That kind of works in scale. But it was kind of a blend. Now, back to true classics figures. The next was Night Stalker. As I said, I'm not going to be reviewing the Club Grayskull figures, just classics in this series. So Night Stalker was originally intended to be part of an the oversized assortment. And again, there were 4 planned, 2 horses and 2, larger people, or like Tuskador, if you will. And Night Stalker was slotted in before Stridor because, well, traditionally you want to do kind of the less requested one first, but it was only going to be a couple months. It's not like we intended you to have to wait years to get Stridor. We went with Night Stalker first because that was to get people excited for Stridor. If you did Stridor first, people would be like, yeah, okay, cool, Stridor, I guess I might get Night Stalker. But if you do Night Stalker first, then everyone's like, well, where's Stridor? See, it's all about building excitement. That's what marketing is, marketing 101. Now, Stridor did get eventually released by Super 7 using the Night Stalker mold, but originally he was intended to be part of the 2016 lineup, and you wouldn't have had to wait that long or know whether or not you were even going to get a Stridor, because it was going to be part of the 4 oversized figure assortment. But the whole thing got cut in half when the new team reevaluated resources and also needed to do resources towards the Club Grayskull Filmation line. So if you had Stridor growing up, yay. If you had Night Stalker, even better. Now, I didn't have Night Stalker. I had Stridor, but I knew he was coming in December until he wasn't. But I was so glad Super 7 put him out because I wanted Stridor so much more. All right, let's get now to the next basic figure for classics, and that is this guy here. And if you have no idea who we're looking at, well, maybe you weren't a Filmation fan. This is General Sundar, who starts off with the Horde, but then he becomes a good guy. But that's why he wears Horde armor. And you may notice he comes with not only weapons and his blasters, but he comes with, count them, 3 additional helmets. And sigh, unlike the publicity photos for him, which attached the alternate helmets to his body, those heads were not intended for that body. It drives me crazy when publicity shots just do this, just stick parts on bodies they don't belong on. They were meant for the Horde Trooper. And there was a single Horde Trooper that was supposed to be released the same day as General Sundar, as day of sales. It wasn't part of the sub, but it was going to be offered to allow you to army build, bulk up, get more Horde bodies to use these heads. It was supposed to ship together. But unfortunately, again, things that fall through the cracks, and because it wasn't part of the sub, I think the new team forgot to put the Horde Trooper up for sale and didn't realize it was sitting in the warehouse for months and months and finally sold it in late 2016. But ideally, it was meant to be tied to General Sundar, and even though you didn't get his little flying car, at least you could get a body to use those extra heads for. And that's the story of that. All right, well, the last of the single figures is the Horde Wraith. not wrath, like a ring wraith from Lord of the Rings. Now, this was kind of your sort of cheap man's Shadow Weaver, but also your badass man's 2000X wizard, because they are badass looking, and the Horsemen knocked this one out of the park. I love floating ghost figures that, kind of also when they have bases to make them hover. But yeah, really creative use of tooling with 2000X. And the reason I called it the sort of poor man's Shadow Weaver is they didn't have access to Shadow Weaver or any of the Filmation characters from She-Ra for 2000X, so they put the Horde Wraiths in sort of in her place. So yeah, it's those weird She-Ra, He-Man, they're different properties technically, and the license, because the Horde appeared in the old toy line, they can be in MOTU, but She-Ra can't. I don't know, it's a mess. The point being is, without Shadow Weaver, the Horde Wraiths were created to fill this void, if you will, no pun intended, with them being stuck in the void. And, well, I guess they were into Spondos, not the void. But they're really cool, and they translated amazing to toys. And you can army build. I think I wound up getting 4 or 5 of these guys, even though I still don't have room to display. And if you didn't have Shadow Weaver, now you at least had a substitute, because she was a sub-only figure. All right, the last of the large-scale figures, again, what was supposed to be 4 figures, 2 large men and 2 horses, wound up being 1 large man and 1 horse. And that large man is Tuskador. So he used the Ram Man body, the Ram Man buck, which was very deliberate because we had this huge buck and we wanted to create more characters like that. Now, the original toy, of Tuskador back in the 80s in the New Adventures line was a basic figure, but on the show he was much larger. So this was kind of one of those things that does happen a lot in the 80s. It's like how there was no Hulk in the Secret Wars line. So Tuskador could be finally reimagined as a large, bulky character with removable tusks that could get plugged into the front or the back, and he could be a little bit more accurate to his cartoon size, not his toy size, which was just basically shrunk in order to make it a basic figure. And of course, he shipped on Ram Man's card. No bio for this guy, like all the other 2016 figures, even though bios were written. We'll get to that in another video series coming up. And now New Adventures had its big, brute elephant dude. All right, the final release from Mattel for Classics was the Roton and Skelecon. Now, this one got some interesting pushback. People saying, wait a minute, okay, everyone wants a Roton. That's a very popular vehicle, and it was the first bad guy vehicle that we did. But why would you include such a fan-demanded character as the Skelecon, who people wanted to army build, making you buy a whole vehicle just to get a whole, bunch of Skelecons? And by the way, if you don't know what a Skelecon is, they're sort of Skeletor's minions that have popped up in everything from Ladybird to the Netflix show. All right, well, the reason is obvious. You pack a fan-demanded figure with a fan-demanded vehicle because that's how sales work. I think someone put that in the comments under that question. They're like, I think you answered your own question. Like, why would you put an army builder figure with a must-have vehicle? Well, because it gets people to buy the vehicle. But of course we knew people were going to want to army build this guy. We're not out to, much like with the Horde Troopers, originally a 2-pack, but then we had the single one that was supposed to be released at the same day as a figure with different heads for them. So the same thing was planned for the Skelecon. There was supposed to be a single release. It's why when Axel and I put them in the mini-comic, we deliberately designed a second version that had wings, and in fact the same wings that were used for, Lord Dactyls, and the Horseman's Drago Man. And when I spun him around, when I finally got the figure, I was like, no, they didn't tool him to have the removable wings, because the whole point was when we did the single version, we were going to pack him with the wings. So that way you could army build either version. But one tool would have allowed us to just repack it without development. But they didn't give him the wings. Arg. Or release a single version, like they did with the Horde Trooper. So that was the plan. He would have been on a single card like this, but with the wings, but they never tooled him to have wings. So great plans that just sort of fell through the cracks. But that was the plan, to make the Skelecon more of an army builder figure. You'd first get him with the Roton, and then you could build up even more and have the wings or the non-wing version, whether you wanted to plug them in or not. But without wing holes, well, no point in releasing a winged version. I guess I could have still released the single-carded version, which, again, was the plan for later for 2017, but of course by then, well, Mattel wasn't making classics anymore. But you did get a Roton. I kind of saw this as Mattel's last gift to fans because I think this sort of slipped through the system, getting tooled. Uh, the fact that they released such a huge item on a cut down year was a bit of a surprise, even to me. But hey, the license still had somewhere to go, and you could even give the Roton to this guy because he's cool.